This is the morning of the 18th of December. A clip put up by Facts Verse. 7 reasons Lee Harvey Oswald is innocent in JFK assassination. I haven't listened to this yet, but I think I've got a few more reasons that I'll come up with. In the meantime, I'm having some lunch. I got a little French fries going. So let's have a listen.
That to me yet. The first thing I heard about was when the newspaper reporters in the hall asked me that question. You have been.
Lee Harvey Oswald is a name forever linked to one of the darkest days in American history. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy as the alleged lone gunman in Dealey Plaza on November 22, 1963. Oswald became the central figure in a story that continues to inspire intense debate, endless speculation, and a host of conspiracy theories. Today we'll explore 7 compelling reasons why many believe Lee Harvey Oswald was innocent in the assassination of JFK. The rifle that didn't fit the crime.
I positively know nothing about this situation here. I would like to have legal representation. Well, I was questioned by a judge. However, I put at that time that I was not allowed legal representation during that very short and sweet hearing. I really don't know what the situation is about. Nobody has told me anything except that I'm accused of murdering a policeman. I know nothing more than that.
One of the first red flags raised by skeptics of Oswald's guilt involves the rifle allegedly used to kill President Kennedy. The Mannlicher Carcano rifle, found on the 6th floor of the Texas Schoolbook Depository, was quickly tied to Oswald, but experts have raised serious questions about its reliability. Firearms specialists have pointed out that the bolt-action weapon is cumbersome and difficult to fire rapidly with accuracy. Yet the official narrative claims Oswald fired 3 shots in under 6 seconds, hitting a moving target with deadly precision. Even more suspicious are the inconsistencies surrounding the rifle itself. According to photographic evidence, Oswald was seen holding a rifle in his backyard, but critics argue the weapon in the photo doesn't match the Carcano.
All right, I did a whole series of videos on this, and they took top marksmen, put them on a platform with either the same gun or similar gun, and they had a car moving at the speed of Kennedy's limousine. The marksman couldn't cycle the gun as fast as those shots were fired, let alone with any accuracy. He couldn't cycle it. That's one thing I want to bring to your attention. Let's go back.
Some researchers have suggested the rifle photo may have been doctored, noting oddities in the lighting and proportion. And no fingerprints of Oswald were found on the weapon until days later under highly questionable circumstances. The Warren Commission relied heavily on the rifle's connection to Oswald to support the lone gunman theory. The unlikely shooting position.
Real quick, I'd like to enter into the record a document that was actually one of these declassified documents of the CIA rejecting the lone gunman theory.
Another point frequently raised in Oswald's defense is the actual location from which the shots were allegedly fired. Oswald was said to have been in the 6th floor southeast corner window of the Texas Schoolbook Depository, but witnesses and forensic reconstructions have shown this was not the most logical or effective vantage point for a skilled shooter to target a moving motorcade. Dealey Plaza was a well-documented crime scene, and many experts have recreated the event using computer simulations and first-hand analysis. These reconstructions often conclude that a shooter from the 6th floor would have faced significant visual and physical obstructions, including tree branches and signage, especially during the first few seconds of the shooting. Yet the shots that struck Kennedy appear to come from angles more consistent with a frontal or side shot, not from behind as the official story suggests. Numerous eyewitnesses on the ground also reported hearing shots from the grassy knoll rather than from the book depository. The directionality of the sound and the reactions of the crowd, many of whom rushed toward the knoll instead of the building, have long been cited as evidence that at least one shooter was elsewhere. All these details have contributed to a growing body of thought that Oswald simply wasn't in the right place or position to carry out the shooting alone.
Kennedy got shot right here, right there, in the front. Oswald was behind him. Look what Jackie Kennedy did. She jumped up from her seat to scoop his brains off the trunk. His brains were all over the trunk of the car. Oswald was never in front of Kennedy. And they also had a bullet go through the windshield, which they didn't tell you. Nobody was made aware of that. But I found it in some archive a while ago. Let's go back.
The strange timeline of the Tippit murder.
Tippit had called him over to the car door. He leaned in and talked to him, they said, for a few seconds, and then Tippit got out and started walking around the front of the car to get to him, and Oswald stepped back 2 or 3 feet, and when Tippit got to the left front fender of the car, Oswald pulled out his pistol and went into that Marine stance that he'd been taught, and just bang, 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 bang 4 times, just like that. He didn't move his gun up and down, he had left it steady. And so the first shot that hit Tippit was low along the belt area, and the next one a little higher. We went forward with the first shot, and he started turning to his left, and the bullet walked on up his body as he fell. When he was going down, he fell on his left side, and as he went down, his head passed the line of view, line of shots, and the bullet hit him in the temple and come out the top.
Oswald was apprehended not for killing.
The reason they killed Officer Tibbetts was they needed a body that was similar in stature to Kennedy's. Matter of fact, at the police station, they used to call Tibbetts Kennedy. I think that Tibbetts' body is in a grave of J.F. Kennedy, and Kennedy's body is probably in a grave of Tibbetts. We know where these graves are. This can be easily proven. We can get DNA from Kennedy's daughter. And the whole thing's a joke. Let's go back.
Killing JFK, but for the murder of Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit. According to police reports, Tippit was shot around 1:15 p.m., and Oswald was picked up at the Texas Theater shortly afterward. However, multiple timelines conflict when trying to place Oswald at the scene of Tippit's murder in the short window of time available. Some witnesses have claimed to have seen Tippit speaking to a man who did not match Oswald's description shortly before the shooting. Others stated Oswald was already at the theater at the time Tippit was killed. This has led to speculation that Oswald was being framed or was intended to be eliminated as part of a larger cover-up. Adding to the confusion, the shell casings found at the Tippit crime scene reportedly did not match Oswald's revolver, and there were conflicting reports about how many shooters were involved. The polygraph and voice stress test evidence. While Oswald was never given a polygraph test, various forms of modern analysis have been applied to his speech and behavior during his brief time in custody. One of the most discussed is the application of voice stress analysis to Oswald's recorded interviews and statements. These tools, often used in law enforcement today, are designed to detect deception through vocal tone patterns. Several independent studies using Oswald's televised statements, such as his famous "I'm just a patsy" comment, have been examined using these technologies. Analysts claim that his voice did not exhibit the stress patterns typical of someone lying. In other words, Oswald may have genuinely believed what he was saying. Furthermore, the way Oswald handled questioning has intrigued psychologists and profilers for years. He remained remarkably calm, repeatedly denied any involvement, and never confessed, even when faced with overwhelming pressure. Unlike many suspects who eventually break under interrogation, Oswald held to his story until the end, reinforcing the belief held by some that he was innocent. The lack of motive and connections.
No, sir, I am not a communist, and I think that the red herring and so forth is rather ridiculous to toss into this conversation.
Then are you a Marxist?
Well, I have studied Marxist philosophy, yes, sir, and also other philosophers.
But are you a Marxist? I think you did admit on an earlier radio interview that you consider yourself a Marxist.
Well, I would very definitely say that I am a Marxist. That is correct.
Prosecutors and investigators are often guided by the question of motive. Why would someone commit such a monumental crime? In Oswald's case, the official narrative paints him as a disgruntled loner with radical political leanings. But when examined closely, his motives become murky at best. Oswald had a history of supporting both far-left and far-right ideologies at different times.
Motive. So who had a motive? Well, the CIA had a motive. Lyndon B. Johnson had a motive. Lyndon B. Johnson's neighbor was the FBI director. And the FBI director kept files on everyone. And he gave a file on Kennedy. That's Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover. Gave a file on Kennedy to LBJ. Kennedy had picked someone else to be his running mate. And Lyndon B. Johnson got a hold of Kennedy and said, if you don't elect me, you're not going to be president, and here's why. He showed him the dossier that he had. When Kennedy ended up picking Lyndon B. Johnson, he sealed his own fate. The CIA wanted to get rid of Kennedy because Kennedy was going to get rid of the CIA. The Pentagon put together an action plan to blow up an American airline and to sink an American ship and blame Cuba. So Kennedy would launch a war against Castro. When Kennedy found out about that, he said, I'm going to scatter you on the 7 winds. That's why they killed him, because he was going to get rid of them. There's your motive. Now, I also read another article where Oswald was actually seen in a picture standing in front of the book depository when the shooting took place. Let's go back.
Which has led to confusion over his true political stance. His supposed sympathy for Castro's Cuba has been cited as a reason for wanting Kennedy dead. But this theory overlooks Kennedy's back-channel negotiations with Castro towards normalization, which might have actually appealed to Oswald. If he was a passionate Marxist, the notion of killing a president quietly working towards peace with communist nations seems inconsistent. His mysterious connections to intelligence agencies further complicate the picture. Oswald's time in the Soviet Union, his strange re-entry into the U.S., and his odd interactions with various pro- and anti-Castro figures in New Orleans suggests he may have been used or monitored by intelligence agencies. Eyewitness contradictions and forgotten testimonies.
Now the prisoner
Let me have it. I want it.
being let out by Captain Fritz. There is a prisoner.
There is He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot.
Much of the case against Oswald relies on official testimony presented to the Warren Commission. However, many eyewitnesses to the events of that day offered statements that contradicted the commission's findings or were left out altogether. Over time, researchers have uncovered accounts from individuals who described hearing gunfire from multiple directions, seeing suspicious individuals not matching Oswald's description, and witnessing strange behavior from law enforcement. One of the most cited examples is the testimony of Jean Hill, who stood near the motorcade route and insisted she heard 4 to 6 shots, not 3. Hill also claimed to see a man running from the grassy knoll immediately after the shots were fired. Other witnesses described men with radios or suits acting oddly near the knoll just before the shooting, suggesting coordination rather than a lone act. The Warren Commission's report largely dismissed these conflicting accounts in favor of a streamlined narrative. But later investigations, including the House Select Committee on Assassinations in the 70s, acknowledged the probability of a conspiracy based on acoustic evidence. Oswald's own behavior and statements. Finally, Oswald's own words and actions in the 48 hours following the assassination offer some of the most compelling reasons to doubt his guilt. Upon his arrest, he denied all accusations and asked for legal representation, a standard move, but one underscored by his repeated statements that he didn't know what was going on. His repeated phrase, "I'm just a patsy," became iconic and has fueled alternative theories ever since. He seemed genuinely shocked by the charges being leveled against him. According to police and media interviews, he cooperated to some extent, but consistently denied any involvement. He didn't attempt to flee the country or destroy evidence. His behavior was erratic, but not consistent with someone who had just pulled off the crime of the century. He appeared calm, lucid, and confused more than anything else. After being shot by Jack Ruby in police custody, Oswald never got a chance to fully defend himself in court. Now it's time to hear from you. What?
Like I told you, folks, he was an absolute patsy. They always have a patsy. They had one at Parkland. They had one at Sandy Hook. They had one at Route 91. They always have a patsy, don't they? And who's they? Well, you know who they is, don't you? I'll attach the link. Absolute bullshit. Like I've said in countless videos, they can exhume the grave, and you'll see that Tibbetts' remains are in that grave. And in all probability, Kennedy's remains are in Tibbetts' grave. How difficult is this to prove? Problem is, who are you going to go to? You're going to go to that worthless attorney general who's got her nose up Trump's ass so far her eyes are brown? How about that cross-eyed Kash Patel? You've heard me say this virtually a couple of thousand times. There is no one to go to. That's what's really sad. I can't do this alone, folks. Pass it along, and thanks for listening.